The calls are getting louder for Russian President Vladimir Putin to face charges of war crimes over his invasion of Ukraine. Shock, outrage, and condemnation. Those are the reactions being generated across the globe to images coming out of the town of Bucha near Kyiv. And as we report on this story, we want to warn you some of the pictures and details are graphic and may be disturbing. Newly released satellite photos are said to show one key aspect of that horrific scene in Bucha. U.S.-based Maxar Technologies say this was taken last Thursday. It shows the outlines of a mass grave on the grounds of a church. Also, gut-wrenching videos of bodies scattered along the street, all of them civilians said to have been murdered by Russian forces. Ukraine's president visited Bucha earlier today to see the devastation there firsthand.
Решение, быть ли Украине членом НАТО.
President Zelensky has repeated his claim that what happened in Bucha is genocide and a war crime. He says it makes negotiating a ceasefire with Russia more difficult. We are also hearing from a Ukrainian lawmaker about what he witnessed in Bucha.
I saw women killed. What the most awful, I saw a body of burnt in the vehicle, boy or girl, a child, I don't know, maybe 6, 7 years old. It's so awful, it's hard to explain. That's a real massacre, and that's a real genocide against Ukrainians from Russian troops.
Now, more stories of murdered civilians are coming to light following the Russian withdrawal from the Kyiv region. 4 bodies were found in this shallow grave 50 kilometers from Bucha. The town's mayor, her husband, and son were among the victims, all reportedly shot. Now, the horror of war repeated close by. A man's body found in a well, again, allegedly killed by Russian forces. Senior correspondent Margaret Evans is part of the CBC News team in Ukraine. She's in Kyiv and visited Bucha yesterday. She has more on what she saw, but again, a reminder, some of the details and pictures in her report are graphic.
One of the first things that we saw was a destroyed bridge over the River Irpin. And on that bridge, you saw bombed out Russian tanks and armored personnel carriers. The bodies of the Russian soldiers still there on that bridge. That was from a movement of the Russian tanks at the very beginning of the Russian invasion. People might remember it. It was destroyed by the Ukrainian forces, but the reason that nothing has changed on that bridge is because the Russian forces essentially took hold of, occupied, and laid siege to the communities on the other side of the river. And the shelling was taking place back and forth against that river. So that just to remind people of how long that people living in those communities have been under siege, about a month. And we saw a lot of destruction, moonscapes, complete apartment buildings destroyed. But really the most disturbing things, of course, in terms of what we were seeing on the ground were the bodies and were the eyewitness accounts from people that we talked about civilian deaths and atrocities potentially taking place in Bucha in particular. Along one street, again, we saw a huge column of Russian tanks destroyed. But the houses around were also destroyed. People living in fear in their basements. They were without water and electricity. But scattered around on some of these streets, and we were doing a drive-through for a lot of, not just Bucha, but neighboring Irpin, you would see these images, incredibly disturbing images of people who looked to be civilians, certainly dressed in civilian clothing on the street, left there. A man with a shopping bag just by an intersection. On one street, we were directed to a house that was still standing by neighbors saying that there were bodies in the backyard. 2 men laying on their backs. Again, no sign that they'd been killed in shelling. Incredibly disturbing images, and it just got worse the deeper that we went in. At one apartment building, we actually came across a garbage dump. We were shown this garbage dump by members of the Ukrainian Armed Forces who were accompanying us. There were 7 bodies left there. The workers, emergency workers, had just arrived. They were starting to put them into body bags, but it was quite clear from one of the bodies being put into the bags and then into the emergency vehicles that this was a man whose hands had been tied. So these are the kinds of reports that are so disturbing to people. The mayor of Bucha has said that he believes 280 civilians have been killed there since the start of the invasion on February 24th. There are the reports you were talking about already of satellite images of mass graves, and that's just Bucha. We're not even talking about Irpin. Now, we were allowed to go in under military escort just yesterday, and it's the same for war crimes or prosecutors being sent by the Ukrainian government into those areas. They're just starting to do their work.